So indeed, this is the iPod mini 2nd generation, and recently I've been in the market for a media player that will play my lossless audio files while sounding, well, pretty good. And this thing seemed like the perfect option. It's fairly cheap, comes recommended by a lot of people, sounds absolutely fantastic, has a really easy to see screen, and is just all around brilliant. It can also run a free and open source operating system, which is really important for me. It's just all around a fantastic little music player. However, the main problem that I have found is that unfortunately it only has 4 GB of storage. And that's really not enough these days, especially if you plan to put lossless audio on this thing. However, what if I said that you could put one of these guys, a 128 GB microSD card, into here? Well, I'm a little bit inspired by DankPod, so in today's video, that's what we're going to be doing right now on the Linux Lounge. So indeed, in today's video, we're going to be putting 128 GB of flash storage into an old school iPod mini. And to do that, we of course need the iPod mini. This is the 2nd generation, which will support more storage. I believe you can go up to 256 gigs on a 2nd generation one, but I think the 1st generation will only accept 128 gigs. And you need to be careful which one you've got because they both look quite similar. But for this video, it doesn't matter, we're only putting in 128 GB. Now, in order to put this microSD card in here, what we need is one of these guys, which is a adapter. Now, as we're an extremely high-tech tech channel, we got the cheapest thing that was available on the internet, and we're just going to hope that it works. We also need a SD card adapter because this takes a SD card. Now, essentially, put this into here, and that's quite tight. It probably shouldn't be. It's quite interesting. There you go. That's gone right in. Yeah, that'll stay firm. And now let's go ahead and put in the microSD card. Really building up, using adapter after adapter. It's no worse than the new iPhone, I guess. And now we're left with this thing, which we have to put in here. Now, the disassembly for this thing is a little bit of a pain, so I'm probably going to have to turn the camera off for a little bit until we get this to the point where we can go ahead and put this in. Thankfully though, there are lots of guides out there on how to disassemble one of these guys, so if you want to do that yourself, it's not hard to find out how. So I will be back in a minute with a disassembled iPod. Alright, well, as you can see by my messy desk, a lot has happened since I last turned the camera off. So I've gone ahead and taken the iPod to pieces and pulled everything out that I need, and I've got to say, it was quite a challenge and far more so than I expected. I don't know if it'll show up on camera, but the iPod absolutely massacred my pry tool. It was really hard to get these plastic bits off. But now everything's off, I've lifted up the battery, we've got the motherboard here. Hopefully I've not broke anything. I've pulled out the hard drive, which this is really impressive. This is a teeny tiny hard drive, it's very impressive. Now it originally came with these, but we can't get those onto this little adapter, so I don't know if they're necessary, but we're going to have to do without either way. And what's quite cool is the iPod requires this little cable here at the top of this adapter, which I pulled off the original thing here. So in theory, this thing should be ready to go and should more or less be a perfect fit. So let's go ahead and put this down, and it should just go right into there. Although it's a bit of a struggle to see through the camera, but that's fine. So let's just go ahead and put that in. And there we go, that's a promising click. So now I've just got to put the battery back down, which I am not entirely sure which way that goes, but that seems about right. Now, in theory, this should all be ready to go back together again. Now, the guide I was reading suggested that this needs some double-sided tape, but honestly, that seems to be in there pretty well, so I don't think it'll be necessary. But if you're doing this, you should probably use some double-sided tape. With that said, let's go ahead and reassemble the iPod and move on to the next step. And there we go, our iPod mini is now reassembled, and it's like no one was ever in it in the first place. And I've got to say, this thing is leaps and bounds easier to get into than modern Apple products, and it's actually quite impressive how everything is put together. It's also really impressive how user serviceable and upgradable this thing is. You can change the battery, as you've seen, you can change the storage, you can replace the click wheel. there really isn't much that you can't replace on one of these, and it is fairly easy to get into, but bear in mind, it is still an Apple product. Arguably in all the best ways, like it's brilliant design how they managed to pack all this into here, but it's still difficult to get into, so this isn't for the faint of heart. Now I haven't tried to turn this on yet, so I don't know if I've accidentally broke something. Let's hope that I haven't, because if I've broke something, you're about to see my soul be shattered on camera. So let's go ahead and turn it on by pressing the menu button, I believe. Now I think the hold switch is actually on, so I'm going to have to switch that off first. And it's got a little bit sticky, but that's something I can look into later. And indeed, if you can see that, which is quite difficult to see because it's fairly dark in here, but we're getting a storage error, which that's probably a good sign, because now we're going to have to fire up a Windows virtual machine. Unfortunately, yes, I do need Windows for this. This can't be done on Linux, which is a shame. Go ahead and wipe this, then go ahead and install Rockbox on it so I can use it on, Linux with free and open source software. So I will see you in the Windows virtual machine. Let's see if everything worked. And here we are on my Linux computer running a Windows virtual machine. Now you can't see it, but the iPod has in fact entered disk mode. So now in theory, if I pass the iPod through to the virtual machine, it should work. And here it is, seeing Apple iPod mini. That is a good start. So let's go ahead and open iTunes, assuming that iTunes doesn't open itself. And what we should be able to do from within iTunes is actually format the iPod. And that's also promising because I named my microSD card SD, like I put it into my computer, formatted it before I put it into the iPod. So that means that in theory our adapter is working. However, iTunes seems not to be, which is nothing unusual for iTunes. And there we go, I've got iTunes to see my iPod, so in theory it should just be a matter of hitting restore iPod, and it should, theoretically, give us our iPod with our 128 gigabytes of storage. And after I've done that, the next step will be to go ahead and install Rockbox. Now I've heard that apparently Rockbox can have some issues with iPods with, large storage capacities, for instance ours. However, let's just see how it goes. So what I will do is I will go ahead and leave iTunes do its thing, and I'll be back once it's done all of that. And iTunes did finish its restore, but sadly it's still in recovery mode. So that means something somewhere along the line hasn't worked. So I'm going to go ahead and, try restore it a few more times and fiddle with a few other things. Now I have heard that this is by no means seamless, and I've seen a few other people who've had to try and restore it a few times in iTunes, so it's no big deal. So what I will do is I will go ahead and disappear, give this a few more tries, and I'll be back and tell you what happened. And there we go. As you can see, I've got my iPod connected and it's being recognised by iTunes. I did eventually get everything working. Sadly, there was no trick or secret to getting it to work. I just had to format it several times over. I tried it on Windows, I tried it on macOS, I tried messing with the partitions on Linux to see if that would work. I tried installing Rockbox to see if I could bypass the Apple operating system altogether. Sadly, the only thing that worked was just trying again and again and again until eventually restoring it worked. But as you can see, now we've restored it, the whole 128 gigabytes is recognised, and let's go ahead and try and put some music on it to see if it works. So I've gone ahead and loaded up the rather magnificent ELO album out of the blue just to see if it works. So let's go ahead and, hit apply, sync and replace, and let's see if it works. So as you can see, it's copying the tracks over and it says it's syncing. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is let that sync, and then we're going to move back over to the device to see if everything worked. And here we are back on device. As you can see, everything is working fine. And I'm sorry about the reflections and stuff, there really is no good way to film this thing. But if we go into music, we can go ahead and see that sure enough, Out of the Blue is on the iPod. Now I don't plan to use the Apple operating system, but this was helpful just to go ahead and test. And sure enough, the music loads a lot faster than it did off the mechanical drive, because previously there was a bit of a pause between tracks. Now there isn't, so it's really fast, and the cool thing is this. So if we now go into the settings, which is down here I believe, and we go into About, and sure enough, capacity 118 gigabytes. i.e. all 128 gigabytes from that SD card is recognised, and I now have a 128 gigabyte iPod mini. The 4 gigabyte on the back now is completely wrong. There's many times that. So I'm going to go ahead and go off and install Rockbox on this thing and all of that sort of thing. Maybe that'll be a topic for a future video, but for now that's my 128 gigabyte iPod experiment. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I will see you in the next one, and I thank you for watching.